A woman just got off plane from a tiny island in the middle of the South Atlantic. She's walking through the arrivals hall, normal, tired maybe, jet lagged maybe, and then she collapses right there on the floor of the airport. Paramedics get to her fast, but it doesn't matter. Within minutes, she's gone. Here's the part that should terrify you. Her husband died the exact same way. 5 days earlier on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, and by the time doctors figured out what actually killed them both, the thing that killed them was already somewhere else. This is the story of the MV Hondius, a ship that left port with 147 people on board and came home carrying something that had never spread quite like this before. Picture this, you've saved up for years for a trip like this, not some floating resort within a water slide, a real expedition, zodiac boats, Antarctic ice, albatrosses the size of dinner tables. On April 1st, 2026, the MV Hondius pulls out of Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost city on Earth. With 88 passengers and 59 crew from 23 different countries, among them a Dutch couple, retirees maybe, the kind of people who'd spent months planning this exact trip. Before they even boarded, they'd been traveling through Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, birdwatching, out in nature, nothing unusual about that. Nobody on that dock had any idea what was already inside of them. Six days into the trip, the Dutchman starts feeling sick. Fever, maybe some stomach trouble, the kind of thing you'd chalk up to bad shellfish, or a stomach bug going around the ship. Nobody panics, and why would they? But it gets worse. Fast. 5 days later, April 11th, he's dead. On board the ship in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. Thousands of miles from the nearest hospital, and there is the detail that's going to matter. A lot later, nobody tested him. His symptoms looked like a dozen other things. Nothing pointed to anything exotic, so the ship does what ships do when someone dies far from land. They keep his body and they keep sailing. 13 days after leaving Argentina, on April 24th, the ship finally reaches land. Saint Helena, a speck of a British territory in the middle of the Atlantic, so remote that flights there happen once a week. If that, his body is taken off the ship. Finally, someone can examine him properly. His wife goes with him, and she's not feeling well either. The next day, she boards a flight from St. Helena to Johannesburg, and that's the flight, the one you just watched her collapse and die after. At the very top of this video, two people, same illness, both dead, within 2 weeks of leaving port, and the ship company still hasn't said a word about what's going on. And here's where things get weird. The exact same day the wife dies in Johannesburg, another passenger on that ship starts showing symptoms. He's evacuated mid-evac of the ship straight into intensive care. In South Africa, 5 days later, on May 2nd, a third passenger, a German woman, starts struggling to breathe. But unfortunately, she doesn't make it either. 3 deaths now, all linked to one ship. And doctors in South Africa working on the passenger who's still alive in the ICU finally get a lab result back. And it was Hantavirus. Now, if you've heard of Hantavirus at all, you probably know it is a rodent disease. You get it from breathing in dust contaminated with the urine or droppings of infected rodents. Deer mice, field rodents, that's usually how this works. There's 2 versions of what it can do to you. One version attacks your kidneys, and the other, the one we're talking about here, attacks your heart and lungs. At the same time, doctors call it cardiopulmonary syndrome. Your lungs fill with fluid, your heart can't keep up, and it can happen in a matter of days. So here's the problem. There were no rodents on that ship. The World Health Organization gets pulled in, and what they find isn't just 3 deaths anymore. They end up identifying 7 cases connected to that ship, confirmed and suspected, including the people who'd already died. And that raises a question. That should make your skin crawl a little. If this doesn't come from rodents on the ship, how is it spreading? From person to person, because there is one hantavirus, just one out of dozens of known strains that can do exactly that. It's called Andes virus, and it has a story and it has a history back in 2018. In Argentina, the same country the ship departed from, a single birthday party became what epidemiologists call a super spreading event. 34 people infected and 11 of them died, all traced back to one gathering, one virus spreading person to person in a way hantaviruses almost never do. So now investigators go looking for the connection and they find one. Fast, before boarding the ship, the couple who died first had been traveling through the Argentina and Chile, including areas where Andes virus is known to circulate. In local rodent populations, the theory forming in this, one of them picked it up on land before ever stepping foot on that ship. And once symptoms started, in close quarters, in shared cabins, sharing meals, sharing air, in a way you only do on a ship, it spread. The ship's own doctor, the person who would have been examining every sick passenger, got sick too. That's not proof, but it's exactly the kind of pattern you'd accept. If this really was spreading human to human, here's the hard truth about the particular version of the virus. There is no cure, no antiviral that just makes it go away. If your lungs and heart start failing, the only thing doctors can do is put you on a machine that oxygenates your blood for you, buying your body time while it tries to fight the virus off. For most survivors, that window is just a few days. You either make it through or you don't. Which means catching it early, it's a nice to have. It's the entire game, and that's actually the one piece of good news. In this whole story, once the passengers still on that ship knew what they were dealing with, they knew what symptoms to watch for. They knew to get to hospital immediately instead of waiting it out. Knowing what killed those 3 people probably saved someone else's life. Now, before you start eyeing every rodent-adjacent surface with suspicion, this isn't new, and it isn't as rare as it sounds. Last year, Betsy Araqua, Jen Hackman's wife, died from hantavirus exposure traced back to New Mexico. That same state is where the US first identified hantavirus in human at all. Back in 1993, it's been quietly circulating in rodent populations in the Americas. For decades, most cases stayed isolated: one person, one exposure, one unlucky encounter with contaminated dust in an old shed or cabin. What made the Hondius different wasn't the hantavirus showed up, is that for what may be only the second documented time, it appears to have jumped from person to person on a ship, in front of the entire world watching. At the time the story was first being reported, investigators still hadn't fully confirmed every detail, but what we know now is that the outbreak was traced conclusively to Andes virus, and contact tracing eventually reached passengers scattered across a dozen countries. On nearly every continent, 3 people never made it home. And it all started with something so small you'd need a lab to see it, carried maybe on the boots of 2 bird watchers who just wanted to see condors in the Andes. I'm not telling you this to scare you off your next trip. Outbreaks like this are almost always contained fast, and public health systems, as slow and frustrating as they can look from the outside, actually did their job here. Cases were traced, ships were quarantined, lives were saved, because people paid attention to a pattern before it becomes something bigger. But it's a reminder of something worth sitting with. The smallest, most invisible things, a virus you can't see, a rodent dropping on a hiking trail, can still end up being the story that makes the news. Wash your hands, pay attention to your body, and if you're ever somewhere remote and someone tells you something feels off, believe them.